Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining our today's session. AWS User Group Madurai is back with another wonderful session talking about the AWS Cloud Practitioner Bootcamp that we have organized here. And this is a wonderful initiative what is done by AWS User Group Madurai. And today we have one of our key speaker who is very active in the community and will be helping us to understand how to deploy and manage the infrastructure. Before we really jump and understand how exactly or what's the content of today's session, let me go ahead and share my screen and talk about a couple of housekeeping stuff. And then won't take a second more and pass on to our speaker for today. With that, allow me to share my screen. So, yep, AWS User Group Madurai, welcome you all. Thank you for joining the session. If you are still new and joining it for the first time, please do join the AWS User Group Madurai Slack workspace. The link is floating or flashing on the screen. It's https://bit.ly/join AWS MDU. I'll put the same link in the chat. So if you are pretty new, please do join it today itself. So this session will be hosted virtually. So a couple of housekeeping stuff from my end, a couple of rules which we will request you to please follow the same. Be aware of others, like please do respectful, welcome everyone and open. If you have any sorts of questions, queries, please post in the chat. Our speaker will try his best to answer all sorts of questions. So please be friendly and patient. If it takes some time, don't hesitate. We are actively monitoring the question chat. So all the questions which are on the chat window will be answered before the session ends. Next, please be understanding of differences. So there are different people joining from different places, different cities, I would say different even countries. So they would have different thought process and different understanding. Some may be experts, some may be beginner. So please be understand of that difference. Be kind and considerate to each other, right? Just be sure that in case if there are any questions someone may have, that's fine. They may be a beginner new to the AWS, so that's okay. And again, at the last, don't hesitate to post out your questions. Since this is virtual, you can for sure interact with the speaker in whichever platform you are viewing this particular video. There is a chat window. Please post the question on the chat. And the same, I will narrate it to our speaker, and he will be really looking forward to answer all of the session, all of the questions what you have, which is around this session or maybe in general about cloud practitioner. He'll be open to answer all of the questions. So please keep couple of stuff in mind. As I was talking about, let me give you a quick intro why exactly we are planning to have this bootcamp or what are key motto to achieve from this bootcamp. So this bootcamp is all about beginner friendly. So you are an expert and don't have an AWS certification with you for cloud practitioner, or you are just zero and you want to start the first step on the cloud. This bootcamp will design for all different kinds of audience. This bootcamp will also have practice tests. So it's not just a theoretically session driven what we'll have. This also will have different practice tests, simple, medium, and complex to prep you to help you for the actual exam. There will be certain giveaways in terms of different swags, different credits based on how you participate in assignments, quiz. So those are different swags which you have, which we will announce it at the end of the session. But do participate actively, collaborate in each of the session to get a chance to get a giveaway. All the attendees who are attending all of the sessions, we are capturing those details and we'll have a certification of attendees, as well as each demo or each speaker will have some hands-on session, some demonstration. So it won't be just theoretical. It will be backed by a couple of demos. And at the last, as I talked about in the previous slide, if you have any questions, please post in the chat. We'll be happy to answer, as well as we'll have doubt solving sessions. All the speakers part of this entire bootcamp initiatives are also part of our Slack workspace. So you can even ask the questions to them on the Slack, and please do join the Slack channel for the same. So without taking a second more, I want to introduce to Sri. Sri, I know him personally outside this bootcamp also. There are many sessions. He has been actively participating in different community initiatives, and happy to see that today is the first time she is here to talk about how exactly you can deploy and manage infrastructure. Let me give a quick introduction about Sri. So Sri is very passionate when it comes to cloud DevOps. I can personally say my experience has been very active in community and currently working for a financial management company. So please feel free to leverage the best of his time. If you have any questions and queries, do post in the chat. He'll be happy to answer. With that, let me invite Sri to the stage. How are you doing today, Shri?
Thank you. Good. Thank you, Sanchit. Thank you for the wonderful introduction.
Awesome.
Yep.
Yeah.
Welcome, everybody. I'm extremely excited today to present this session to the learners of AWS. I'm going to talk today about deploying and managing infrastructure. The agenda for the session today will talk about cloud deployment models, service models, and we will go through different services that AWS provides, and we'll also look at the use cases and in which scenarios we would pick which service. And following by that, we'll have a demo, and we'll finish it off with a small quiz today. So before I start my presentation, I wanted to give you a little story in my own personal experience when I was working before cloud existed. At one point, we wanted to order a database server, kind of big in those days. This was like a few years ago before cloud. And the vendor who was supplying the server said he needed at least 3 months to provide us that server. And those were the days. Since those days, we've come a long way when cloud has come. So I'm actually very passionate about cloud and DevOps space. So my areas of interest are especially around infrastructure, anything to do operations, performance, things like that. So hence I'm going to present this topic today. And we'll start with the presentation now. Coming to cloud deployment models, I believe Neetu has already went through this stuff, but we'll just quickly revise, and then we'll look at the services that AWS provides. We have 3 different types of models. One is a private cloud, the second one is a public cloud, and the third one is a hybrid cloud. Now, who really needs private cloud? Private cloud is useful for people who need their own cloud and they cannot share the hardware with others, and they have to have their own cloud. And in those cases, people go for private cloud. But being private cloud, that is the most expensive cloud infrastructure. It does cost a lot compared to the other two. Public cloud is where we host it in AWS, and we share the hardware, and we host the resources on a shared hardware. It tends to be a lot cheaper because as AWS grows, the cost of services reduce, and that's where we get some savings. Hybrid cloud is an example where you have an application which cannot be ported to cloud. It needs to reside on premises, but part of the service can be on cloud. Like you could store your data on an S3. That becomes like your application is hosted on premises and your data resides in S3. That is kind of a hybrid cloud. So as per this diagram, we have an on-premises environment. You could connect from on-premises to AWS using a VPN or a direct connect. It's not both, it's either or. Like you could also have both, but in general you use a VPN or a direct connect, and you connect. That is the on-premises connection with cloud. That becomes a hybrid cloud. And moving forward, coming to service cloud service models, we have 4 types of service models. One is on-premises, which is similar to a private cloud, where you manage everything, like your physical hardware, your hypervisor, your operating system, application data, and security as well. When it comes to infrastructure as service, we don't manage the physical hardware or the hypervisor. We only manage the guest operating system, runtime, application, and data. And that's the example would be an EC2. When you get an EC2, you're given a VM and you install your apps on it, and you maintain your data, and you maintain the security of that as well. When it comes to PaaS, we only manage application and data. We do not manage the hardware, the hypervisor, or the guest operating system, or the runtime. And when it comes to software as service, most of it is managed by the vendor. Everything is actually managed by the vendor, and we just use the service. An example would be a Gmail or Zoom, things like that. And moving on to next slide. So as I said, the infrastructure as service, an example would be EC2, and platform as service, an example would be Elastic Beanstalk. We'll talk about a little bit more about Elastic Beanstalk. We also have a demo as well in the coming slides. And the software as service is Gmail, Zoom, things like that. We only use the service. We do not worry about the infrastructure or the data or anything like that. We just use the service. And next slide. And Neetu has already covered EC2 in the previous session. I'll just quickly go through what EC2 is, and then we'll kind of compare EC2 versus the other kind of things like a serverless service, like some serverless or Docker or container, and how they're different, and also the use cases when you would pick an EC2 or when you would pick the other services. EC2 is nothing but a virtual instance. It's like a VM. We order a server, and we can spin them up in a matter of minutes, and we can also tear them down within minutes as well. You get to choose your operating system and software, and you only pay for what you use, which is per second billing. And there are a few different types of EC2 options. These are important for the exam. It's important to understand as well when you would pick these ones, in what scenarios. On demand is something you would pick when you're not unsure about your usage. You just want them at a low cost, and you wanted it to be flexible. And when you also do not have a real commitment of server, you just wanted to use whenever you like, on demand seems to be the best case in that scenario. Reserved is if you're willing to commit 1 to 3 years, and if you're willing to pay either full, partial, or no upfront payment, then you could go for reserved instance. With reserved instances, you could save up to 72% of on demand. That depends on whether we're willing to pay a full payment or partial payment or no upfront payment. When you do pay full, you get the highest possible discount, and the discount reduces to for the next ones, like partial and no upfront payments. Spot instances are suitable for when you have flexible start and end times, and also if your application can recover from any interruptions, and spot would be the best, and you could save up to 90% cost of on-demand cost when you go for spot. Now, there are two other ones, which are dedicated hosts and dedicated instances. Dedicated hosts are actual dedicated physical server, and it's a most expensive option. The reason why it's expensive is you get your own hardware, and the use case would be if you have a software that is tied up to the cores, like license is tied up to the cores. In that case, a dedicated host would be the preferred option, because the licensing model dictates that you could only have this many cores, and it has to be on a physical host. Dedicated instances it's similar to dedicated hosts, but the hardware is still shared, and there is a $2 fee for dedicated instances per region. So it's a virtual instance on hardware just for you, but the hardware could be shared with other users. That's a dedicated instance. Now, there is also one more, that's something that has come up recently in past few years. It's called savings plan. This one is like you're willing to give a commitment to use for a certain number of hours. It could be weekly or monthly. If you're willing to give that commitment and say you wanted to use from 1 to 6 hours every week, then savings plans would be the better option. You get a discount because you're providing the commitment to use instance for a specific period of time for from 1 to 3 years period of time. And the difference between savings and reserved is 24/7. You pay for every hour, but savings plan you only commit to a certain number of hours per week or month. Now coming to Elastic Beanstalk. Like I said, Elastic Beanstalk is a platform as a service. So the difference between Elastic Beanstalk and EC2 is here we do not manage any underlying infrastructure. Say you have a Java app or you have a Node.js app, and you could take that app and deploy it in AWS in just a matter of minutes. You do not need to manage the infrastructure. You do not need to look after capacity. When I say capacity, as the user's demand increases, the Elastic Beanstalk will automatically scale your application, and it'll scale out, and it'll scale back in when the demand decreases. It takes care of load balancing. It takes care of application health monitoring, everything. Elastic Beanstalk as a service is a free service. However, the resources that are provisioned are not free. There are services with AWS where you could use them as a service. There is no cost with those services, but the resources that it provisions are not free. An example, I would say Elastic Beanstalk. Another example is CloudFormation. CloudFormation doesn't cost anything to deploy or automatically deploy infrastructure, but the resources that it deploys do cost. And moving on to next slide, Lambda. Lambda is a serverless technology. Now, people think that when we say serverless, there are actually no servers. That's actually a myth. There are servers, however, we do not manage those servers. We only focus on our business or our development, and we do not focus on infrastructure or things like that. And the another good thing with Lambda is in terms of pricing, you only pay for the amount of time your Lambda executes. Say your Lambda executes for a minute, and you only pay for that minute. You do not pay the other times. Now, the difference between EC2 and Lambda is EC2, you will be billed, you have to pay for that server every second you use. In terms of serverless, you only pay when there is a request for that. Otherwise, you do not pay anything for it. And another important point to note, Lambda has a limit for execution time, which is 15 minutes. Say you have an application that actually takes more than 15 minutes. Then in that case, Lambda would not be the right choice. So we have to be mindful of that. Any application that can respond within 15 minutes, Lambda would be an ideal service. And it is way cheaper than other services. In terms of a use case for Lambda, say you have a real-time file processing or data processing or stream processing, Lambda would be an ideal fit. Or you have a streaming data, like where you're sending a batch of messages and you want something to process those messages and store them in the database, then Lambda would be a right choice for it. And also, having said that, Lambda has come a long way. since it's been introduced. Recently, one of the announcements is when you use Lambda, I'll probably show it in the demo as well, you get some temp space, which used to be 512 meg until few days ago. Now it's been increased to 10 GB. And RAM as well. Earlier it was less. It's been increased to 10 GB RAM. And the deployment size as well. We didn't have 10 GB earlier. It was, can't remember exactly, but it was a lot lesser than 10 GB, but now it's got 10 GB. And another important point with Lambda is your virtual CPU is dependent on the memory that you request. So we can't, it's indirectly, like you cannot request CPU directly. You get CPU based on the amount of RAM you request. So that's another important point to note with Lambda. Moving on to the next one. There is also another service called Amazon Light Sale. Light Sale is something that AWS have come up with. Suppose you have a business user or a non-technical user, and they wanted to set up something in Amazon. Light Sale is the service where you do not need to know anything about AWS. With a click of a button, you could set up like something like a WordPress or a blogging or blog website or something, or a web application with click of a button. And the other day I was actually looking for this to host a WordPress. Then I did play around a little bit on EC2, and it took me a while to set up WordPress on EC2. And then I went to Amazon Light Sale. I was able to do that with a click of a button, and it only cost me $3.50 a month on a Linux host. And if it's a Windows host, it cost me $8 a month. But if you compare, an EC2 might cost more than this one. So Light Sale is a product. The use case is if you have a business user or a non-technical user that wants to host a website or a blog, Light Sale would be the right choice. And the whole underlying infrastructure is all managed by Amazon. You do not need to worry about the infrastructure. Light Sale also provides few other services, namely databases and containers. And say you have a WordPress website and you want a database to connect, and you're not a technical person, you could use database, and it's Light Sale database, and it gets charged hourly price, and they go up to maximum monthly plan cost, whatever the cost is. It won't exceed that. And it's completely managed by AWS. You get, when you select the database, you get two options. You get either a standard one, or you want to get high availability one. So when you lose a primary, then the secondary will come up as the primary. And your data is also backed up. And you could restore up to past 7 days using the database restore tool. That is Light Sale. Now, we spoke about EC2, where you get your own server and you manage everything on the server. We spoke about serverless, where you host your code and it only runs when you need it. We also spoke about Beanstalk, where you deploy the app and it runs all like it's there and you don't manage. And we also spoke about Light Sale. And the next one is containers. This is fairly new, and it's kind of the current state-of-the-art technology, I would say, where there is a difference between virtual machines and containers, conceptually and architecture-wise as well, why they're different. And also, I'll explain why containers are a little bit they're faster than the traditional virtual machines. When you have a virtual machine, you have a physical server. That's the underlying hardware. Let's say it's a hardware. Then you have a hypervisor. When you're using a VMware or something like that, you have a hypervisor. On top of hypervisor, You create a guest operating system, then you start installing your apps, or you create your applications or your other software, things like that. That's the traditional way of doing in virtual machines. The difference in containers is you have a physical server, then you have only one operating system. You do not have individual operating system for each container. And the Docker runs on top of the operating system. So in this case, what happens is the Docker is letting you containerize your application in a way that it can boot up a lot faster because you don't have operating system. It's like a kernel, and it boots up so much faster because the image is very small. Like, so for example, if you look at any operating system, it could be some gigabytes, something. Because you've taken that and your image is so small, it's easier to bring up your container so much faster, and you can host it on the same physical server. That's with containers. They're primarily used for applications only, and you can move them from one host to another host if necessary. And with the good thing with container is it's all managed by the provider. Like if you use Elastic Container Service, it takes care of your pods. Like if a pod dies, it'll bring up another pod. Or if you're using Elastic Kubernetes Service, which is an open source version, it supports open source Kubernetes, that's EKS. And Amazon's version type, the one official one is ECS. So moving on to the next one, I'll give a brief. You do not need to know this whole thing for your cloud practitioner, but I'll try and keep it very brief so that you also understand ECS. So ECS is the way Amazon provides for us to run our Docker containers on AWS, and they call them as tasks. There are two types that you can run your ECS on Amazon. One is you can use your EC2. That means you get your own server and you manage your cluster. You have full control of it. The another way is called Fargate cluster. Fargate. That is where you do not have access to the underlying infrastructure, and it's like the serverless kind of model. You only worry about your tasks, and Fargate takes care of everything for you. Like, if your container, like if your task dies, it will bring up another task. So those are the two types. That's something important for the exam to understand. If you want managed service, then you would go for Fargate. And if you need control of the infrastructure, complete control, you would go for EC2 service. Now, how does ECS work? The way ECS works is you build your Docker image, and the Docker image is nothing but your app and the libraries packaged as like an image. You put that image in Elastic Container Registry. That's like a repo of your images. Then you create a task definition file saying what all you need. It could be written in JSON or YAML, and the task is created from the task definition file. And the task in the task definition file, you actually mention which image to use. That image is fetched from ECR. It will spin up the task for you in ECS. And the service, it could be similarly, like, you could host your WordPress blog or a website, things like that. And it's completely taken care of by Amazon. And moving on. And last but not the least, in terms when you manage your infrastructure, like you have to do your complete code management, deployment, and things like that. like how do you manage your complete end-to-end CI/CD? It's called CI/CD. What is the difference between CI and CD? Continuous integration means when you write your source code and you build and you test. Those three are called continuous integration. So you write your source code and you build your packages, you build your jar files, you test them. Those three come under continuous integration. Continuous deploy comes in when it becomes CI and CD is when you include deploy, then it becomes continuous deploy, CI CD. Now AWS have their own flavors for all these tools that we use. First one is code commit. It is similar to GitHub. So you store your code. AWS flavor is code commit. Code build is to build your packages. Like suppose you have a Java application and you committed your Java code. You build your jar files or WAV files using code build. Then with the help of code build and other tools, you can do your testing. And if you were to deploy it to your dev environment or test environment or production, you use code deploy. And all of these are called code pipeline. If you whenever AWS refers code pipeline, they are referring to all four services, all three services: code commit, code build, and code deploy. And moving forward, okay, we've reached the demo stage. I just wanted to check if you have any questions or if you're happy for me to move to demo.
Yeah, Shri, I think there were two questions.
Yep.
So the first one is from Rohini, which is around, can you tell us when I should choose EC2, when I should choose light sale service, and can you tell me the difference use case for the both?
Okay. So with EC2, you get the complete control of the infrastructure, how you want to manage. Light sale, you can log into the instance, but you don't have complete control. Most of it is managed by Amazon. And I would say light sale is mostly used by non-technical persons. Like if you someone is a business owner and he's not very technical, and in that case they use light sale. But if you have a technical person and he likes to know which versions he wants to install, he wants to manage the packages that are being installed, or the database wants to manage everything, then EC2 would be the right choice. Hope I have answered your question. Did I answer your question?
Yep, thank you. And we have one more question for, can we use Lambda to monitor the values which are entered in DynamoDB? And if some value cross our defined threshold, can we create an email alert using SNS stating the value change?
I'm not sure I completely understand, but
So
let me know. Yeah.
let me pardon this out. Can we use Lambda to monitor values which are entered in DynamoDB table? And if some entered value cross our defined threshold value, can we create an email alert using SNS stating the value change?
Yes, you could do that. Yes, yeah, that's one of the serverless patterns. You can definitely do that. Yeah. So definitely you could use all three services. So you want to store some values in the DynamoDB, and you want to have a thresholds of those values. And if you cross those thresholds, you want it to send an email. So that can be done using Lambda, DynamoDB, and SNS. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that's where the two questions which we have.
Okay. So we will move on to demos. I'm going to show three demos. One is client demo, how to use AWS client. And I'll also show you how to actually construct the messages. Like, if you want to deploy something, that we'll have a beanstalk demo and we'll have a Lambda demo. Now, you all are aware how to use console. So I won't be going into console at the moment, but I'll show how to use Cloud Shell. So if you were to set up your client environment, the first thing you have to do is you have to install client on your machine. I'm on a Mac here, so this is the Mac OS instruction how to install it. I would normally get this package and install. If you're using Windows, you will get an exe, which MSI, and you install the MSI. So once you install the MSI, you type AWS version. Since I've already installed on my machine, I'll just show you here. Give me 1 minute. So AWS version, it gives you which version you're using. After you've done that, you go to IAM and create a user. You go to users, add a user, say something like AWS client. And there are two ways of accessing for any user. You could give programmatic access, which is the client, SDK, or any API calls. And you don't need to give console access because they're only using this for programmatically, like they want to use the client or SDK. Or if you have a need only to do the other way, like if you want the console access, you take off the programmatic access, or you can give both as well. But for my requirement, I do not need console access. So I'm just creating a user with programmatic access, and then I go next. And then you kind of create a group and assign a policy to it, depending on what sort of access you wanted to give. In my case, I've already created a group and a policy. It's not a best case scenario, like it's not the recommended way, but the kind of work that I'm intending to do, I would like to have administrator access. So I've put the user under that group. Then you can add tags if you like, review, and you can create the user. Now, you have to be a bit careful when you do this. You do not want to show your secret keys to anyone. And you get the access key ID and you get the secret key. I won't be showing it here, but I'll kind of walk you through what you need to do after that. Once you've done that, you go and type AWS configure on your terminal. Once you do AWS configure, you kind of copy that. You can copy this, you put it here. I won't be putting secret access key, I'll just type something here. Then region, like if you want to use North Virginia or something, you could say that. Or if you do not want to say, you can press enter. I'm going to go here. Say I want to do US East 1. Say US East 1. And then the output format, whenever you run commands, you get how do you want the output to be displayed? You could display it in JSON, text, YAML, or ASCII table. Normally I prefer JSON. I'm going to put JSON here. And that's how you configure your user. Now I've already configured my user. So what I'm going to do, just to show you, so what this does is, it actually, whenever you configure, it stores that information in these files. You see here, it stores your access key and secret key. That is why it's very unsafe to store these values here. So I'm going to remove this. It's not the best way. or best practice to keep them there. I'm going to, so I already have my give me 1 minute. I see that. So I have actually, I have already set up. So I've just showed you how to do that. Now the next one, if you were to create a bucket in S3, normally if you're not sure how to create a bucket, you type AWS and you type AWS help. Then that will take you to help. And if you're looking for S3, you on this screen, you type / and type S3. And that kind of shows you that, okay, the S3 has got these 4 different types of APIs that you could use. So we'll go back again. We use escape, : and quit. And then again, we do S3, AWS S3 help. Then this will bring up another help page. When you press space bar, it kind of shows you what all you could do. This is one way of, so here it's telling me that you create a bucket by using make bucket MB. So AWS S3 make bucket S3, and you do forward and test some random numbers. So it has created a bucket for me. And then again, I would normally, if I'm not sure, I would do S3 help and see how could I list my buckets, and it's listed my buckets here. So there is also another way to do this. This is actually a more preferred way. You could use a Cloud Shell, which is on top right corner of the console here. Over here, you actually do not store your credentials. And I think AWS gives some storage as well for you to have files here. This is actually a more preferred way if you need to interact with the client. It's so much better to use Cloud Shell. It is exactly what I showed you here. It's the same thing, but within AWS. And I'll also show you one more way while that's coming up. You don't need to use terminal to learn how to construct those messages. You go to command line interface and then documentation. This is a guide, not this one. Give me 1 minute. Yep, you just try one of the things, and this is your S3. Exactly what I showed you in the terminal. You come here, this is the command line interface link, and you could see the examples here, how you can actually make a bucket, remove bucket, all that. It's the same thing what you see in the terminal. You could also look up here, and you'll also have some examples as well, how to create bucket or how to copy files using the command line. And the usage is here, AWS S3 and your command and your options, arguments. That's what I wanted to show you. And here I have my Cloud Shell that has come up. I'm going to run the same command here, and I see the exactly same thing. But however, you would not have anything here to store, like it doesn't store your files here. That's what I want to show you, the first one. Do you have any questions at this stage regarding this demo? Okay, we will move on to Elastic Beanstalk demo. type Elastic, it will bring up the service, which I'm after, Elastic Beanstalk. Close this. So we create an application. Let's say AWS Madurai. And now here, we normally need to pick which application we wanted to install. Like it supports .NET, pretty much all major languages. Let's pick Node.js for now. And then you can select which version of Node.js you want to use on which, whether it's a Linux 64-bit or Node.js running on Linux too. Let's pick 64. And we're going to use, you could upload your code here. If you do have a code, you can upload your file here. And the maximum size can be 512 meg. So for the demo purposes, we'll just use a sample application that's already provided by AWS. And once click create application, this will take a few minutes. We'll let this continue, and in the interest of time, we'll just move on to the next demo. Once this completes, I just need to show you what it actually, like how the application looks and what it does. All it's doing is it's creating the environment, and it's doing the CI/CD. It's building it, deploying it, and setting up a load balance. Like if you opt for load balance and stuff, you do all that. Yeah. Is it okay if I move on to the next demo while this is happening? This will take a few minutes. And the next one I wanted to show is Lambda. Let's create a Lambda. This one is an interesting one. So Lambda is serverless. So to create a Lambda, you type Lambda here. And you come to Lambda. And you click on create function. And again, say AWS Madurai Lambda or something. And for Lambda, we're going to use Python 3.9. You could either use x86 or ARM64. ARM64 is a little bit cheaper. Then for Lambda to execute, we need to have a role. For Lambda, it needs to have permissions to execute. So if you're unsure, you could use the option for let Lambda create the role, or if you have an existing role, you can use that existing role. For the demo purposes, I'm going to let Lambda create a role for me, and we do not need to change anything else, and we'll create a function. So once your function is created, you'll come here. They've given us a sample code. We won't be using this. We will remove this. I'll put the code that I've got. So let's step through what this code is actually doing. So that's the class name, and there is a method in here called Lambda handler. Now, how does Lambda know that it needs to call this one? If you scroll down a little bit further down, you have a handler. This is the entry point for a Lambda function. So this matches to your handler. See, if you see here, it's got Lambda function and the Lambda handler, and that's what exactly this is. And say, if you rename the file here, say something called index.py or something, you would need to come down here and edit it and update that. Otherwise, you will not be able to run your Lambda code. Now, I've got my code here. So there are two things with Lambda handler. One is an event, one is a context. Now, what do I mean by event? Event is something that I'm passing it to Lambda. Like, I'm passing a JSON message, which I'll show in a minute. Event holds all that information. Context is something, it's related to Lambda. Like, where is my Lambda running? Or what source code? And how long has it been running? And how much memory I've allocated to my Lambda. That's all in the context. In order to test this, we're going to go back to the screen just to get my test event. I've got my test event here. So once we
Shri,
update
sorry,
it.
just one request from the audience. Please, can you zoom in your screen a bit?
Oh yeah, sure. Sorry about that. Yep, give me. I wanted to just let me know if it's clear.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
are good. Thank you.
cool. Yeah, so I'll repeat a little bit. So this is my code. So the entry point is Lambda function and the Lambda handler. How do we know? Is by this handler function. You see the Lambda function and the Lambda handler. Say if I rename this file to index.py, then I need to go here and I have to update this as index.lambda handler. That's similar to a main function in Java, I would say. Like if you have a class and a main, something like that. So I've written my code here. Whenever you write your code, you save it and you have to deploy. Whenever it says changes not deployed, that means the code is not active. You have to deploy. And I'll show that in a minute. And I want to test this function. So in order to test it, you click test, configure test event, say testing, say let's just say test. And my code is expecting an input message. I'll take that out for now. So I wanted to send this message, right? I'll save this. So I've configured a test event and I'm actually passing an event called input message and my code is here and I want to test this. Click on test. But if you look at here, it failed. And the reason why it failed, it's giving me a stack trace saying in your lambda function.py, line 4, it failed. And it gives me a stack trace as well. Here, it's telling me that your key error is input underscore message. Then if I go back to my code, if you look at my test event, I've actually put it as input message, but my code is referring to input underscore message. So because of that, I need to update my code. Now again, I've updated my code and I haven't deployed. So I need to save and deploy. Now let's test this again. So now it says, okay, so it's fine. So it's successful. Now let's do one more thing. I want to print. So I'm capturing a message and I'm print it here. I want to print the context and see what happens with like how does the context look like. So I'm going to test again. If you look at my event here, I'm not seeing any of my changes. The reason being I didn't deploy. See, and this is a very common mistake most learners do, and I've done it as well. I've made changes and I forgot to deploy, and I need to deploy. Once you deploy, let's test it again. And now it's giving me the Lambda context. You cannot really see it here, but I'll show you another place where you can actually see all this. So that's the part with Lambda. And there are a few more things with Lambda. We covered the test event. Monitor. Everything that you do in Lambda gets stored in CloudWatch logs. So I'll open the CloudWatch logs. Before I go there, I just want to show you one more thing. We spoke about AWS increasing ephemeral storage, memory, things like that. Those are all here under the configuration. So when I click on edit, you see here memory. It only gave me 128. You could go up to 10 GB. And like I said earlier, the temp storage space used to be 512. This was introduced just a couple of days ago. It's been increased to 10 GB. Now, I've also mentioned in my presentation that the timeout, the Lambda can only execute for 15 minutes. Let's just say, let's put it to 15 minutes, 1 second. See, the maximum timeout the Lambda can have is only 15 minutes. It cannot have more than that. And that's another one. So we could save this. Now let's go to cloud. Now, two other things that good to know is how do you monitor? Everything that you do in Lambda gets stored in CloudWatch. X-rays is something, say you have an application, and you say you have an application, like someone asked me a question about Lambda and using a DynamoDB and using an SNS to send a notification. X-ray is useful to trace the amount of time it's taking to takes within the app. Like, your transaction from a point A to point B, X-ray is helpful. CloudWatch is for all your logging, like anything that you do in pretty much in any service that you do, you will find all that information in CloudWatch. Now I want to show you 3 logs that are here. So the first one that I did was here, where I made a mistake with my Lambda. I have to reduce a little bit to show you size. So the first one that I did, where I made a mistake in the code, it's stored here. It said you made a mistake at line 4, and it clearly tells me that what happened here. Now going back 1 level up, there is next log is I've done 2 things. I've executed it twice. The first time I got what I was expecting. The second time I made my code changes, but I didn't deploy. So you would see exactly the same thing twice. So every time you execute, it gets logged to a CloudWatch. And the third one, where I've added a line to see Lambda context. You see it in the Lambda context, where you can see very clearly over there, it gives me what log group it's using, and it gives me the function name, and it's telling me that your memory is 128, and you're using the latest code. You haven't versioned, you're not using some alias or something like that. And it's also telling me account number and where it's running, things like that. That's the demo for Lambda. We'll just go back to my Beanstalk. I think this is still going on. This is done. All right. So here. So Beanstalk is when you have your jar file or your application file, you just provide the file and everything is managed by AWS. So I've just said I wanted to use Node.js on this Amazon Linux. I've given my sample file and it's saying it's okay and it's deployed. And if you click on that, it's telling me it's deployed. Like this is the application and it's given me a DNS name and it's deployed. Do you have any questions regarding the demos? And the next one is we'll go to quiz. We have 3 questions and we'll have a recap and we'll wrap it up.
I don't think there is question so far. So team, please post your question on the chat so she can help you with the answers or help you to get it clarified.
All right. So we'll move on to the quiz. I have 3 questions. So please try. So when you do answer, put number 1 for first question, and these are not multiple, just single choice. I'll give you a minute to read, then I'll read the question so that you have time to read the question. So, okay, the question is, a company would like to use EC2 instances with no commitment and an irregular usage pattern. Which among the following would be the most cost effective? A. Spot instances. B. On demand. C. Reserved. D. Savings plan.
We'll have a minute for this question, so please do hurry up. We already have 2 answers on the chat. All the people who want to participate in the quiz, please push the answer in the chat section. We are tracking around all the answers. Thirty seconds to go more. Okay. Yeah, Shri, I think we can move to the next one.
Okay, next one. I'll again give you like a minute or so. Please read, and I'll read the question after that. Okay, the question is, a company would like to use EC2 instances for a minimum of period of 1 year. Which among the following would be the most cost effective? And the options are spot instances, on demand, reserved, and or savings plan.
As per the previous question, we have a minute for this one, so please, all the interested folks, please post your answers in the chat. We have a minute for this question. Thirty seconds to go. Yeah, Shri, I think we can move to the last question.
Okay, last question. Again, I'll give you a minute to read, and then I'll read out the question. Okay, so the question is, a company would like to use EC2 instance for a period of 1 to 6 hours every week for a minimum of 1 year. Which among the following would be the most cost effective? A. Spot instances. B. On-demand instances. C. Reserved. D. Saving plan.
Please post your question in the chat. We have 40 seconds to go. Yep. Yeah, Shri, I think we are good.
Okay. Yep. So I'll just quickly recap what we this session. Just give me 1 minute. I'll just recap quickly, and we will wind up. All right. So we spoke about 3 deployment models: private, public, and hybrid. Among all these 3, private would be the most expensive, and the cheapest would be, depends on the scenario, whether you host everything in the cloud or with what kind of services. So we cannot really say which one is cheaper in terms of public or hybrid. And the next one is, we spoke about service models, whether on-premises, infrastructure as service, or platform as service, or software as service. So as you go from the left to the right, the control or things that you need to manage changes. Like on-premises, you kind of manage everything. When it comes to software as service, you do not manage anything except your data. And we've also given examples of what the service models, what they look like in terms of the things like EC2 is an infrastructure as service, Elastic Beanstalk is a platform as service, something like a Gmail or Zoom is a software as service. We briefly went through EC2. The use case is, if you need a complete control of your server, then EC2 would be the right choice. And if you just wanted to deploy your application and do not want to manage it, and if you want AWS to manage it, you could use Elastic Beanstalk for applications. Lambda is a serverless model, and you only pay for what you use. Otherwise, you do not pay. Having said that, Lambda has got a limit of 15 minutes execution timeout. And then I've also showed you a demo on how to use Lambda. Lightsail, the reason why I put this one here is we also have another database session coming up. So I wanted to cover a little bit about Lightsail here and Lightsail database. Lightsail database may not be covered in the next session. Lightsail is for non-technical users or business users where they just want to set up with a click of a button. Lightsail would be the right choice. And the underlying infrastructure is all managed by Amazon. Use case would be blogs or websites or web applications or e-commerce, things like that. We also spoke about database as well, how Amazon will manage it. You get backups. You can restore up to past 7 days, and you only pay for the maximum monthly plan cost, whatever that is. Yep. And we also spoke the differences about virtualization and containers, how Docker doesn't have operating system, so it's a lot more faster compared to a virtual machine. And Amazon provides 2 services. One is ECS to support containers. The other one is called EKS, that is for open source containers like Kubernetes. But Amazon's version is ECS. And they give us 2 sorts of options. One is EC2 cluster, where you have complete control, you manage your containers. The other one is Fargate, where it's completely managed by AWS. Or you just define what you need in a task definition file, and the ECS will set up those containers for you by getting an image from ECR, Elastic Container Registry. Elastic Container Registry is where the Docker images are hosted. It's like a repo of images. Then we also spoke about CI/CD. CI means your code source code management, build, and test. Code deploy, CI and CD means which, if you include deploy, that becomes a CD, continuous deployment. And all these services are called code pipeline. And we went through demos, client demo. We also spoke about security, which one would be the ideal way to use client. I would say Cloud Shell. And we also went through how to construct those messages. You can either use the online documentation or you could use the terminal as well. Then Elastic Beanstalk demo, and we went through Lambda, how we made mistakes, how we rectify them, and different configuration settings, and the logs get stored in CloudWatch, how to look at those logs, and we went through the quiz. So before I wrap it up, thank you for giving me this opportunity and listening to me. I do have something to share. So if you are actually planning on giving the exam, I've shared my notes here. Trying to get to. It's on the presentation. I'll share them later. I've made some notes when I was preparing for the exam. Cloud practitioner and associate architect. So if you're intending to take either of these, you could go to that notes. It's got a summary of all the information that you need to know for the exam, and then you could use it like a revision. Either if you're planning on giving a certified cloud practitioner or solution architect associate. It's got all the points that you need to know before you actually attend the exam.
So, Shri, I think what we'll do, you share the link with me offline. So what
Yes.
I'll do is I'll share this GitHub repo link in the description of the video in the comment section. So you can look into it post this session itself, and that will be preserved. So even you can go back and refer this.
Okay.
We'll do it right after the session itself. We'll put it in the comment section of this video.
Yep. Thank you so much for listening to me.
So thanks, Shri, for being a good speaker here and helping the people to understand and clearing their concepts. With that, let me take it over and make a couple of announcements before we wrap up the session. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So in the last session, we did announce around an opportunity to win 50% certification voucher by performing the task. And last time we announced the task one, which is create AWS account and configure IAM role into it. So this is for the folks who don't have an AWS account, are pretty new into it. This is a task for you guys to create AWS account, configure an IAM role into it, share a couple of screenshot. So that was a task one. I want to remind you guys the deadline is coming very soon. The last date is 31st March, end of the day. So please do participate and get a chance to win the certification voucher, which can help you to get a discount up to 50%. And it's very simple to participate. Please perform this task. Join our Slack channel. The link is in the chat, bit.ly/AWSUGMDU. Please do participate in the Slack workspace and upload the screenshot that you have performed this task. Our moderator will look into it and will announce the winner. So if you haven't still performed this task, hurry up. We are 2 days left with the deadline. So please look forward for the same. That's one. Second, let me walk you through why you should register with AWS User Group Madurai. So it gives you different other benefits. First, networking. For sure, all the AWS user groups works on the fundamental thought process to help you to build that networking with AWS experts, different community members, get an opportunity to learn from them, as well as help to share your experience. Two, you get a special access to AWS contents. You get to know about different webinars, different announcements from AWS, different kinds of opportunity where you can learn and upgrade your knowledge. Three, you get a swag, vouchers, and goodies as per allocated from AWS User Group India. You get a different chance to participate in different events, like how you got this event of AWS User Group, AWS Cloud Practitioner Bootcamp. Similarly, we'll have different events, so you get an opportunity to participate in those events and get an opportunity to win swags and vouchers. As I talk about in the first point, you not only can help to learn from AWS experts as well as you can share your knowledge and learning about it. Certifications, like how we do have this Cloud Practitioner Bootcamp. Similarly, we'll have different opportunities where people share their experience. Like as you saw that Shri just brought up as GitHub repo, where you can practice how to get into the certification. Similarly, you will get different people talking about their experiences and expertise, which you can learn and get certified. And to make it more interesting, we'll also have different job postings, right? So if you are a hiring manager, you can post your openings on the Slack, as well as if you're looking out for a job, you can participate, you can join, and you can get an opportunity to understand where are the different companies where they have vacancies about AWS and other technologies. So that's why we heavily promote. This is a kind of a user group which is not meant for the experts. It's meant for any zero to hero. So please do register. Please do join a Slack channel today itself. Let me give you some of the motivation about the AWS User Group Madurai, covering in detail what we talked about in the previous slide, like why you join a user group, network and learn, content. We have different kinds of events which takes place offline, talking about the blogs, the videos, the reels, to make understanding the AWS and other services in a very detailed fashion to the beginners. So we do have those kinds of offline events. As I said in the previous slide, this user group is for zero to hero. So you are a beginner who's going to start day one on cloud, or you are an expert, spends years on it. This user group is for both kind of audience. The interesting thing is this user group has like regional languages, so it's not just designed for like English or specific one. It can help you to across different language. So if you're in English or Tamil or any other language, you can still join. And the swags, like participate in different events, different offline events, online events, and get a chance to win a swag, vouchers, credits, etc. As I said, please do join us today. The Slack workspace link is https:/bit.ly/join AWS MDU. So if you haven't, please do it itself. And the link is in the description in the chat section itself. And with talk about the presence, yes, the Slack workspace is our primary social media platform which we use for the interaction, but we do have presence across different platforms like LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, as well as Instagram. So if you are doing something interesting, please do tag us at the rate AWS UG MDU, and please do subscribe us and keep watching and keep participating in different events. What we have hosted across in upcoming days. And that's what we have from today's session. Thank you for joining. We'll have more upcoming sessions very soon this week on database. So please do subscribe and get the notification about the next session. I'm really looking forward for you guys to join that session. And again, if you have any questions and queries, please put it in the join a Slack channel or put in the comments of the video. Shri and I'll do go back and we'll see if there's any question we can help you guys. And as well as I said, I'll post the GitHub link right after the call itself. Thank you for joining.
Can I share the answers, Sanchit?
Sure.
Yep.
Sure. Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot about that.
No worries.
Okay.
Just 1 second. Yeah.
So sorry about that. I forgot to share the answers. So the first one, where someone say the requirement in this question, the keywords are there is no commitment and it's an irregular usage pattern. So for this question, the answer is on-demand instances, because spot instances are something that's not right because they can get terminated. There is no commitment to have reserved or savings plan. So the answer is on-demand instances for the first one. The second one is there is a commitment of 1 year, but the question doesn't say whether they want to pay or anything like that. So because they're giving a commitment and they haven't set the hours, how many hours per month or week, so the answer for this question is reserved instances. Similar to the previous question, spot instances can get terminated. On demand, it will be very expensive because you will not get a discount. Savings plan is not the right choice because they are not asking for a number of hours, they're asking for entire year. So for this question, reserved is the correct answer. And the third one is the exact opposite of first two. In this, the keyword is 1 to 6 hours, They do not want to use it for 24/7. They want to use it only for up to 6 hours every week and a minimum of 1 year. So the answer for the third one is savings plan. Sorry about that. I forgot about the answers.
No worries. I think that's fine. It's not too late. So yeah, we are good. Thank you, Shri, for sharing it. And yeah, I've shared the notes of Shri in the chat, and as well as I'll put it on the comment section of the video. Yeah, I think that's all from Shri and my end. We are open. If you have any questions, queries about this session or in certification in general, please put it in the chat section. Shri and I am happy to answer and help you guys. So we'll take a couple of minutes. If there is any question, we'll answer. If not, then we'll wrap up and look forward for your participants in the next session. Please post your question in the chat if you have any. I think Shri, we are good. Yeah, no worries. I think if you have no questions, that's fine. And if any questions comes up later on, don't hesitate. Reach out to Shri or me. Put it on the Slack channel on or the comments in the video. As we said, we'll review it offline and we'll get back with the solution. So that's all from today's session. We'll have more session lined up for the bootcamp. So please do subscribe us, participate, join our Slack workspace to get the notification for the next event. That's all from this session for today. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Shri, for being a good speaker and helping us to learn the fundamental about deploying and managing the infrastructure. Thank you so much for taking out the time. And that's all from the session. Thank you so much and
Thank
stay
you,
safe.
everyone.